Hi, all of you wonderful scuba divers out there. Welcome to the Scuba Diver Magazine podcast, where I break down the latest scuba diving news and things that piqued my interest over the previous week. There obviously wasn't a podcast last week because I was at the Go Diving show, so I've got a lot to break down from that. So yeah, it's been like 2 weeks worth of diving news, and there is quite a lot of interesting things that have happened. But this week on the podcast, the RNLI celebrates its 200th anniversary, so celebrations there. For anyone who's unsure who the RNLI is, they're the lifeboat charity here in the UK that rescues us when we're in trouble. 2 more Liveaboard Fires have been reported. A breakdown for last weekend's Go Diving show, because there were some announcements from some of the brands looking at new diving equipment, and there is a seal who's been biting multiple scuba divers in South Africa. But onto the first news story, which is, yes, the RNLI, or the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, celebrates its 200th year of saving lives at sea on the 4th of March. That was Monday this week, thanks to volunteers giving their time to save others, and all funded by public donations. And during the most recent third of those 2 centuries, many UK scuba divers have had cause to be grateful for the lifeboats, which is why it's one of divers' favourite charities. So if you're interested in numbers, trying to work out exactly how many scuba divers have been rescued by RNLI is a little bit tricky because accurate statistics are quite difficult to obtain according to the RNLI, but one indication is that in 2020 alone, which is of course a year that we don't really talk about anymore, but when diving activities were severely curtailed by the COVID pandemic, the lifeboats still launched 17 times specifically to help scuba divers in difficulties. Now, it was the recommendation at the time that we try and reduce the amount of scuba diving to give emergency services as much of a break as possible because they had their minds elsewhere. But yeah, people still went scuba diving. But what we do know is that the RNLI's volunteer lifeboat crews and lifeguards have now saved a total of 146,277 lives, which is an average of 2 a day. Since the RNLI was founded in a London tavern on the 4th of March in 1824, its crews have launched their lifeboats over 380,000 times. Meanwhile, its lifeguards, who became part of the charity's life-saving service in 2001, have responded to just over 300,000 incidents on some of the UK's busiest beaches, with over 2,000 lives saved. Today, it operates 238 lifeboat stations around the UK and Ireland, including 4 on the Thames, and has seasonal lifeguards on more than 240 UK beaches. It designs and builds its own boats and runs domestic and international water safety programs. And they were at our Go Diving show this weekend celebrating, and I managed to catch up with one of them. They're having a great time. So yeah, if you are interested, it's always worth checking up on the RNLI. Volunteer underwater search teams make headlines in the United States quite frequently, solving cold cases by finding missing persons in submerged cars and the like, but there was no equivalent in the UK before Beneath the Surface was released. So with demand for his dive team services soaring, Phil Jones is wondering just what he started and if he'll ever find time to go wreck diving again. Now, Phil was familiar with the YouTube channels of US freelance dive teams such as Adventures with Purpose and Chaos Divers. Quote, they're mainly looking for cars, and we don't really have cars go missing in the same way because we don't have the public boat ramps. He's not aware of any other amateur group doing anything similar in the UK, but it wasn't long before he and his fellow divers realised just how often people go missing in our waters. So they continue to volunteer at weekends, responding only to direct requests from families and funding all the costs of travel, accommodation, and incidentals from their weekday jobs. Donations soon started to come in, but Phil had decided that these would be used purely to fund the necessary equipment. He reckons that the team has been involved in more than 30 cases over the past 4 years, 13 of them in 2023 alone, and the requests are accelerating because of the increase in his publications. He does say that he'll never criticize the police or anybody who searches for missing persons because it's a very difficult job, even on land, and in water it's especially difficult. And quote, we can operate without the same constraints that the police have, the powers, the resources, and the time frames and the hoops that they have to jump through. There are just so few police search teams now that they can't be everywhere at once. Police officers can be wanting to jump into rivers to save someone, but then they get into trouble afterwards. Nobody should put themselves at risk, and health and safety is key, though sometimes it might seem it's a common sense thing when you know that it's pretty safe. Again, I'm continuing quoting, I'd never try to encourage anybody else to do what we do because I don't want anybody to put themselves at risk, but we don't take any risks. What we do is very safe, really. We're usually we're in 4 to 6 meters of water with no entanglements, and we can see any trees or obstacles using the sonar before we even get in the water. So really the only consideration is that it's usually dark water and zero visibility. Phil is actually looking for volunteers. When asked if he would welcome further volunteers, he said definitely. We're looking for divers to possibly join the team, but we want people to be properly trained before we put them into areas where they could see something and ease them in. We need them to be experienced and comfortable in the water and to be a minimum PADI rescue diver qualified or the equivalent. Beneath the Surface has worked with dive club members before now. Quote, in Aberdeen, we were looking for someone who had been missing for a year, so the remains were going to be skeletal or just clothing. So we're a bit more comfortable with volunteers going to help. But in 2 recent cases, one that had been missing for 3 weeks and one for 5 weeks, and some have been missing for 5 months, so we wouldn't put someone inexperienced in to look into cases like that. For me, I'm quoting here, the most difficult part of all is telling the families that I can't find someone, rather than actually finding them. But it is tough, obviously, when we do find them, so we work with counsellors, and every time we find somebody, we go and have a checkup. We do look after each other. Make sure that people have regular breaks and everyone's okay, because it can hit people differently at different times. Phil is also considering the possibility of launching a second team. Quote, a couple of the other guys are getting good on the sonar, so it might be that we could have a Scotland and an England-based team and could cover 2 missing person searches in 1 weekend because it's getting so busy. We also work with water safety campaigners because we'd much rather stop people going missing than having to find them. Presumably all the thoughts of recreational diving have gone out of the window. Now that he's diving more professionally in this aspect, he was asked, presumably all thoughts of recreational diving have gone out of the window. Quote, I think I got one weekend last year when I went up to Oban and had a bit of lock diving. I wasn't used to being able to see what I was doing. If you're searching, you're typically going to be on the bottom, so rummaging through things and stirring things up, so it's black water, zero visibility type diving. So anyone interested in joining Beneath the Surface should contact their team via their Facebook page, whilst donations can be made directly or through Thomas Stoddart's appeal. I'll put a link to the DiveNet article, and there's links in there that will take you where you need to go. A unusual incident occurred off South Africa's Atlantic coast on the morning of Saturday the 2nd of March when a Cape fur seal ran riot amongst a group of scuba divers. A dive charter rib carrying 8 divers and 4 crew have arrived at the site of the, Udakral Nature Reserve near Cape Town, and the group had just entered the sea when the seal swam among them and started biting them. 6 of the 8 divers had been attacked by the time that the crew had been able to recover them and raise the alarm. The ER24 ambulance service alerted City of Cape Town Water Rescue Network that the rib was heading towards Oceana Power Boat Club, with the injured divers in need of medical care. 2 National Sea Rescue Institute stations and ambulances stood by whilst paramedics assessed the divers' conditions, though in only 2 cases had they sustained bite puncture wounds. A Portuguese woman required hospitalization and was later reported to be in a stable condition, while a South African woman was able to be treated on the spot. 4 other divers, Brazilian and South African men and a French man and woman, had escaped with, quote, minor scrape bite wounds, whilst a German man and a South African woman had been unscathed. All those affected were advised to attend hospital for precautionary broad-spectrum antibiotics, rabies, and tetanus shots. Yeah, especially if it breaks the skin. NSRI and COCT appealed to divers and bathers near the area and along the Atlantic seaboard to be cautious in light of the incident. The former organisation, which was initially inspired by the UK's RNLI, said that the cause of the seals' behaviour had raised questions because the pinnipeds are not usually aggressive towards humans. It commended the dive boat skipper and the crew for their speed in recovering the divers and alerting the emergency services. Yeah, I dive quite frequently at the Farne Islands, and they have a seal colony up there, and some of them can be quite playful, and it can be quite enticing to like give them a scratch, give them a play, but they can be quite mouthy. And like dogs, if your fingers get in their mouths, they might give you a little nibble. But the thing is that these are big animals with powerful jaws. So yeah, a little nibble to them could be a missing finger for you. So you do have to be very careful with that. And yeah, try and keep your fingers like in a fist so that they can't get anything too small that they might just bite off. But yeah, do be careful out there. They are marine predators, so yeah, no, just be aware and try and stay away from the bitey end. A scuba diver exploring a remote part of Australia's Great Barrier Reef has reunited a snorkeler with a mobile phone that he had lost 10 days previously. Alex Java, who was visiting Queensland from Victoria, and his wife Diana had signed up for a Valentine's Day snorkel tour off Hook Island in a remote part of Whitsundays Islands. Alex had dived in and lost his mask. In trying to retrieve it, he managed to lose his phone and its waterproof lanyard as well. Scuba divers on the tour boat had scoured the area with no success. However, with so many images of sentimental value stored on the device, Jara activated a lost phone message along with his contact details on its home screen just in case someone did find it. And despite the secluded nature of the site, it only took 10 days before a newly qualified local scuba diver returned the phone. Carla Dobson of Arley Beach told ABC News that her group were diving on the protected northern side of Hook Island only because in the poor weather it was less exposed. She was enjoying her first dive since becoming certified when she spotted a recognizable logo at a depth of around 15 meters. The phone was buried in sand, but fortunately the Apple symbol remained visible. So yeah, as scuba divers do, you see something shiny, you see what it is and see if you can pick it up. Back home, she charged the phone up, saw the message, and called the astonished and, of course, grateful Jairus, who has now been reunited with the device. Quote, "The ocean is so big, we could have been 10 meters to the left of it or 10 meters to the right of it," Dobson said. And yeah, it was just pure luck that they managed to find it. In the USA, meanwhile, scuba diver Derek Langus from Port Barrington, Illinois, reports that he can't stop recovering Apple smartwatches from the Skates Lake bed. With some 200 Apple Watches now recovered, he has warned owners that the original sports bands fitted to the watches could not be relied on to secure them underwater. Langus makes a living by recovering lost items with the help of an underwater metal detector through his Scuba Bear diving recovery service, and told Shores Local that most of the Apple devices that he has recovered have been fitted with the original wristbands. Although Langos had been commissioned to find some of these and other watches, he'd come across many on his regular dives and says that he keeps everyone in case it can be reunited with its owner. In fact, he says that he hangs on to everything that he finds for the reason rather than selling it, including phones, spectacles, and lost jewelry. That includes a white gold Cartier ring. Very nice. But yeah, it is just a matter of if someone does message and say, hey, in this area, has anyone found such and such? He's more than willing to hand it back to them. So yeah, if you do have a an Apple smartwatch. Just be careful of the strap. You want to make sure that it's nice and secure because evidently, especially around the water, there may not be so secure or as secure as you think. Over the past week or so, we've seen two liveaboard fires, or at least two liveaboard fires that I can see reported. The first one is the Oceanic liveaboard, nothing to do with the Oceanic brand, it's just the liveaboard was called Oceanic, suffered a catastrophic fire whilst operating in Raja Ampat in Indonesia. The blaze, which occurred at around midday on the 1st of March, was reported to have started in the engine room and required a rapid evacuation of guests and crew. Quote, fire spread quickly, but both passengers and crew were rapidly evacuated with the tenders to the village of Airbarek, reported the liveaboard operator Dive Indonesia. Further quoting, everybody is safe and sound. A speedboat was sent to collect the guests and crew and transfer them to the regional capital Sorong, some 90 kilometers away from the island. In Sorong, the guests were accommodated in a hotel and helped to prepare documentation for their return flights, according to the operator, which confirmed on the 5th of March that they were now all back at their home countries. Dive Indonesia has run the Ondina liveaboard since 2001 and added the timber-built Oceanic to its strength in 2017. The vessel itself was only 5 years old at the time, but was fitted with an additional upper deck and lower deck suites to accommodate up to 12 divers, along with a captain, crew of 8, and 2 dive masters. Quoting, we are all grieving for the loss of our beloved Oceanic, a true dream maker that made so many people happy during the 7 years she was with us, said Dive Indonesia. She will always be in our hearts. And looking at the images, yeah, it's a timber hull ship. So all that's really left of it in this final image is the hull, or the keel, basically, and the bow. The rest has been taken by the fire. Meanwhile, details are continuing to emerge about a recent fire on the Red Sea liveaboard, the Sea Legend, which was operating out of Hurghada, which has left a German female diver missing and a number of guests expressing their concerns about the evacuation process. DiverNet, I'm quoting from DiverNet hopes to publish a report on that incident soon. Looking at Tauscher.net, they say, now bear in mind this is a German publication, so the English translation might not be perfect. A tragic fire leads to the sinking of the Sea Legend in the Red Sea due to a cable fire. I presume that means an electrical fire. The Sea Legend, which is a dive boat operated by Dive Pro Liveaboard, caught fire. The vessel sank as a result, and the incident happened at night during a diving trip about 3 kilometers from the coastline. A German diver has been missing ever since. The official reports from Egypt left no doubt for a few days that everything was being done to prevent a catastrophe. Quoting, despite the impending disaster, all persons on board the Sea Legend were rescued unharmed. At the time of the incident, there were 17 tourists from various countries and a crew of 14 on board. All 31 people on board the Sea Legend have been confirmed safe. Now, there is some ambiguity there that I'll get to a little bit later, because whilst they said they had 13 crew members, it appeared that they had 14 crew members. So that missing German tourist, they were just counting heads. They weren't counting actual names. So that 14th crew member sort of made it appear, I presume at this time, that everyone was accounted for when actually they weren't. Another source told Cairo 24 newspaper, emphasizing the efficiency of rescue operations. Interestingly, quote, Michael, one of the rescued, speaks of incompetence and arrogance, and good luck that there were no other victims during the rescue operation. The reports published in Egypt and the persistence with which the notoriously false information was held on are unfortunately a reoccurring pattern. In view of the increasing number of disasters, it is high time for a rethink by local authorities. So Tauscher.net managed to interview some of the guests on board who are involved, and they've published a very comprehensive sort of breakdown. They say there was an inadequate safety introduction. More of an overview of the services and the general ship's equipment were the content of the, quote, introduction on board. This introduction also mentioned 13 crew members, but after the rescue there were 14 Egyptian employees who disembarked. This discrepancy in the number of crew members led to the authorities to assume that no one was missing and to maintain this statement for several days. Only some of the cabins were equipped with life jackets, but these were inadequate. No rescue drill was carried out, and even more dramatically, no instruction was given on possible rescue routes from the lower decks to the top. The installed smoke detectors were probably mostly non-functional. The guests at least did not notice the integrated LED flashing. On the night of the incident, Michael noticed the smell of diving at around 3:30, 3:40 a.m. This came from a hatch in the lower deck that led to the kitchen. After a few minutes, flames were already coming out of the hatch. Jana and Father Heinrich, who were on a cabin in the upper deck, were warned by a fellow traveller with "Get out, get out." Michael, who had his cabin on the lower deck, was also warned by a "Get out," but they couldn't say who it was. A Swiss fellow traveller tried to extinguish the fire himself. The crew ran around in a rather uncoordinated manner, but it was not until the third fire extinguisher was found that one worked. Overall, there was no proper rescue chain. The passengers were allowed to orientate themselves and make their way to the Zodiacs. Some of the staff were praying to Allah at the meantime, and the chaos on board was probably quite violent. Jana spoke of an extremely uncoordinated operation. None of the crew took responsibility. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that the ship accelerated during the rescue minutes, which fueled the fire, blew smoke into the passenger and crew group, and last but not least made it very difficult to transfer to the Zodiacs. In the end, the people without life jackets had to transfer to the unlit Zodiacs, whereby transferring here meant jumping into a rather choppy sea and swimming to the Zodiacs. One of the Zodiacs was not properly inflated or was leaking. The air chambers were therefore only partially filled. In addition, the motor of the other inflatable boat was not working. The boat had to be towed by the working one, but it was problematically filled. After the Zodiacs were able to cover some distance to the ship, explosions from Sea Legend could be heard and seen. That's most likely the cylinders or some kind of batteries. On the inflatable boats, the crew didn't care for the guests neither. By chance, it became known that not even an emergency call was made, whereupon some guests with mobile phones, after a good hour or so, had made emergency calls with their network accessibility. There were no lamps or other light sources on the Zodiac, so this is like 4 a.m. in the morning, so very dark. The Zodiac, which had been problematic since the beginning, filled up with water over time, so they had to bail out. The person steering the engine was already knee-deep in water. The line to the towed Zodiac, the one with the failed engine, was cut after a good 2 hours, and an attempt was made to head for the coast at speed in order to reach coastal waters before the Zodiac finally sank. According to Heinrich's assessment, they managed to reach the coastal reef at the very last minute. The Zodiac would probably not have lasted much longer. The second inflatable boat, the one without an engine or with an unpowered engine, also took on water, but the occupants of the Zodiac were all able to, quote, keep the water in check to some extent. However, they were now drifting on the open sea without an engine and had to continue waiting for rescue. The, quote, rescue by the Egyptian Navy was also an uncoordinated operation that initially failed completely because the transfer from the Zodiac to the naval vessel simply did not work in the choppy seas due to an untrained crew combined with poor equipment. It was only later via the military ship's Zodiac that the passengers could be transferred with difficulty. Michael, who was on this Zodiac, spoke of the poor training of the crew coupled with great arrogance, which led to this disastrous operation where fortunately nobody was injured. The landing later on the coast was probably quite bizarre, with the red carpet rolled out and soldiers standing in line and a crowd of photographers and journalists. The essential things such as medical examinations or interviews about the completeness of the rescue safari guests was not carried out at first. They're more worried about getting the photographs. It was only after all of the rescue passengers had come ashore and were reunited with the occupants of Zodiac 1 that the diving guests themselves realized that only 16 of the 17 international guests had arrived. One passenger was still missing. Neither the Navy nor the crew had initiated such an action. Some of the group's other experiences, including the problems on the journey home, were also hair-raising. The catastrophic handling of the missing passenger is also an example of this terrible accident. To get a complete overview of what happened, it's worth listening to the interview on tauscher.net in full. Yeah, it's in German, so I haven't listened to it. There's probably going to be translated subtitles, but Struth, it really does go to show that you do have to be careful when you're boarding these ships, and even if they don't cover something in the safety briefing, you kind of have to go out of your way to find it out, because fires do happen, and you need to be sure in yourself that that you and everybody with you is can get out as quickly and safely as possible. It's terrible that anything like this has to happen to be able to like raise flags and awareness. But we do need to focus on these and keep ourselves safe. Onto some lighter news. I'm just going to quickly talk about the Go Diving show this weekend. I was there working. We organise it ourselves at Scuba Diving Magazine, and I had a great time, and most of the people that I spoke to had a great time as well. There were a few new things that I hadn't seen before. I mean, I'd seen some of them before, but not like physically in person as such. The first one was the Apex stand. Apex had a huge stand this year. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary, so they really went big with it. They had this 3-story stand. Usually, you come with like either a shell stand with pictures and information, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Apex basically came on like the back of a truck. And then this whole section, it's got these little feet that like lower down, and then it like extended itself upwards. You've got this 3-story with staircases and everything. There was a balcony on the top deck. You had the big screens and everything. But as far as diving equipment, they were showing off their 50th anniversary regulator, which is an MTX RC regulator with that. Which was it? The XTX 200. They did a special edition version of that, which was like black and bronze, which is pretty cool. And on the MTX RC, you have the Apex like Alpha logo detailed on that, which is pretty cool. And they were actually offering one that you could win. I don't think you can. I think they've already given it to someone. But if you could guess the correct weight of not just the regulator, but the regulator in its packaging, which made it quite tricky. Because as soon as I saw, guess the weight of this regulator. Like, oh, okay. Well, it'll be pretty easy to work out the weight of it. It'll be pretty similar to the regular MTX RC, but it was that and the packaging as well. So I was, okay, that's a bit more of a challenge. Because it comes in a special edition box, it comes with a challenge coin and other bits and bobs. So that's not something that you could just search for online. But also they had the new RK4 fins, which is cool. Yeah, it's nice to have it physically in hand. They only had the black one, because the other coloured fins are coming from another dive show. I forget which one they were coming from, a dive show in Europe, and it just got caught up in what you call it, the courier, going through customs and whatnot. It just got stuck. So they're like, oh, okay, great. We got the black version, so at least you can see that. But the other colors were just trapped in transportation hell. But yeah, smart fin. It's they kind of said that it's somewhere in between as far as stiffness and weight. It's somewhere in between the RK3 standard and the RK3 HD. So that like Goldilocks in the middle. So you didn't have to worry about it being like too soft and not having the efficiency, or too stiff and it takes it out of your legs. It's that like in between, and chunkier rails on the side to give you a bit more control for fine tuning, and an adjustable spring heel, which is what most people tend to complain about with the RK3 fins, because it's just a single fixed point. The only way to change the length of the strap is to replace the strap, whereas with this one, it goes back to, I mean, I relate it to the Hollis F1 bat fins, because that was my first pair of like spring heel fins that you could adjust the length of it. You've got 4 mounting points, 2 on either side, so you can either make like both of them long, or you can make one of them short, one of them long, or both of them short. So you have a bit of adjustment depending on how tight you want that that strap. And yeah, it's just a tough vented fin with very modern styling. It looks a lot like a Lamborghini. You can definitely tell they had a picture of that one in front of them when they were designing it. But yeah, nice, cool, good looking fin. I think that got a lot of interest. Mares also announced a couple of things. The first one was their new like camouflage range for their Mares XR. So they tend to, I think they do it about once a year. Every season they change the design of their single cylinder wing. They basically make a backplate and wing system. It's all fully built, so if you're just getting into backplates, you can like hit the ground running. It started off, I think it was their Red Devil, which was the backplate itself was like a matte red. All of the D-rings and whatnot were red, which were pretty cool. And that was just something a little different to stand out from the just standard metal grey. But then in subsequent years, they brought out different designs. They had Psycho Calavera, I think it was called, which is pretty cool. It had all these like skull details. They had Silver Knight, which was just a silvery color, and this year they're going for a like camouflage motif. So it's got a greenish. It wasn't quite woodland camo, but yeah, like a green camouflage detailing down the backside of the wing. The backplate itself was a like olive drab coloring. They've also got I forget which of their second stages. Was it the VR? No, the HR. Second stage, instead of having a black front cover, it's got that that olive drab kind of green front cover. The back plate is olive drab as well, which is kind of cool. And their fins. One of their fins, is it the Power Plana. They have a green camouflage detail to them, so they're leaning heavily into that kind of sneaky diver kind of colorway, which is quite different, quite fun. They also released the Puck 4 computer, the latest edition of their very successful Puck dive computer range. It's more of a budget dive computer, single button user interface, which, considering it's a single button, is reasonably easy to understand. I usually have like a minimum of 2 buttons, just so it's a bit easier to navigate. But as far as the single button user interfaces go, the Mares one is pretty good. Quite nice bright colors to match the rest of their range. There was like a Tiffany kind of blue color, orange as well. I think there was an olive drab kind of color and a standard blacky gray. Yeah, I actually need to email them to get a sample to try it out. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Custom Divers had a little like personal safety device light that they were quite keen to show off. It was it just attaches onto some 2-inch webbing strap, and it's a small little strobe light that has multiple functions, and it's basically, they sold it as a way to like communicate with your buddies like passively. So you could have a green light, a red light, or a white light, and you could change between a proper strobe, a slow blink, or a constant on. And it can just be you and your buddy before you dive. You just set yours up on a shoulder strap, and just, hey, if it's green and it's like a slow flash, everything's fine. If I need your help or I'm looking for you, I'll change it to this. If I'm in trouble, I'll change it to a red. And if I, yeah, whatever it is, you can also use it as a backup light. If your primary light fails and you're in an overhead environment or something, you just need something. You've got that battery, and yeah, it's just a small compact little torch. And yeah, you just bolt it onto your 2-inch webbing strap wherever you want it, and yeah, it's just a small safety light that you can just see from a distance in even in poor visibility, and it's just a way of staying in contact with your buddy quite passively. But if you do need to get their attention, then yeah, you can change the color or the frequency of the flash. And then, yeah, again, on the surface, if you're trying to be found by search and rescue, then yeah, it's always nice to have a strobe. So that was pretty cool. Otherwise, lots of exhibitors. We had 3 halls compared to the 2 that we had last year, and it was just packed, especially on the Saturday. The Saturday was the really busy day. We also did a thing with Shearwater where you could crack a code. So in some of the marketing emails leading up to the show, we hid a small section of a password. And on some of these Shearwater computers, if you visited the Shearwater stand, you would have noticed another section of the code, and if you put them all together, you could have won yourself a Shearwater dive computer, which is pretty cool, which is very nice of them. Someone did win it, and yeah, congratulations to them. And yeah, we just had lots of fun. We had the pool. We had a 90-something thousand gallon pool, so people were trying out side mounts. We had some just try dives as well. Yeah, I think everyone had a really good time there. There was a mermaid pool as well. We had some mermaids splashing around. Yeah, lots of tour operators. We were showing off a new van that we're testing out. It's a converted like panel van, and on the inside we've got beds. There's a sink and cooking arrangements. There's of course a dive locker at the back, off-road tires and all that kind of stuff. We did a video on it whilst we were there. I'm gonna release that as soon as I can edit that together. But that was pretty cool. Did get a lot of interest with that. You can rent it out and yeah, go on some adventures. But yeah, I think everyone had a good time. Lots of talks as well from some of the industry professionals. Lots of workshops. You work on your photography and the like. So yeah, it was a good weekend. But I'm still recovering. I'm knackered. They're very long days when you're working the dive show. But yeah, definitely worth it to see a lot of smiling faces. Now I've pretty much covered new dive equipment. I don't think there was a lot else. My mind has been mainly on the show this weekend. I haven't really looked at new dive equipment, but yeah, the new stuff from Mara's and Apex is pretty cool. Oh, Fourth Element also has a new lifestyle range of clothing, which are pretty fun. They're always good with coming up with new designs, and they do have good quality t-shirts. It's not just basic like Fruit of the Loom kind of stuff. It is really nice quality t-shirts, and they have some fun scuba diving designs. And I've been rabbiting on about other things. I don't really have time for any Ask Mark questions, so I'll get to them next week. But yeah, thank you for listening, everybody. Of course, head over to our website, scubadivingmag.com. Like, share, subscribe to all that good social media stuff. Thank you for listening, everybody, and of course, safe diving.